Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full time and have a collection of hundreds of monster ecology and strategy videos on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing as I upload at least twice a week. The demand for the second video on the Dwarf series has been fierce. So here we go, episode 2, Dwarven spirituality and their primary god Moradin. Let's get right into it, shall we? The gods of the Dwarves are known to them as the Mordinsaman. There are two gods, no longer part of the Mordinsaman. They are Dirinka and Dinkarazan, though that can be very ancient and obscure knowledge of a dedicated dwarven sage that they were ever part of the Mordinsaman in the first place, as they and their worshippers, the Dero, were exiled long ago. According to the Dwarves, Moradin sprang whole and intact from the primal stone of the universe. Also, he was with him was his wife Beranar, and they are two halves of the one whole, and most scholars will tell you that all the other gods of the Mordinsaman are descended from Moradin and Beranar, with the oldest being Dumathoin, Laudagwr, Abathor, Sarindlar, and Clagadin, along with the two gods of the Dero. The next generation of gods, as it were Gorm Golthrin, Dugmarin Brightmantle, Thard Har, and Marth Amor Duin, with yet another generation, the younger gods such as Haela Brightaxe and Deep Duera, basically being like the grandchildren of Moradin and Beranar. Dwarves worship all of their gods. They are a deeply devoted race, and this has only increased over time as the people have faced countless trials and dangers, strived to spread out across the world and do exactly what Moradin has told them and made them to do. Their gods are usually spread out across the outer planes, but their attention is right there with them, and the Mordinsaman take a keen interest in what their mortal children are doing. At the same time, they are powerful pantheons, each bit as tough and determined as the dwarves themselves, often embroiled in conflicts across the multiverse. You may also notice that the majority of dwarven gods are male, and this reflects the fact that, unlike most of the civilized races, most of the dwarven population is male. I'm not sure what the exact ratio is, but women make up less than 30% of the population, at best, and this does mean that they have always taken a long time to recover from a heavy loss in numbers from battles and disasters. So gradually, their population went into decline when they started to migrate across the surface world and face all the increased dangers. But over the last few centuries, that has begun to change. In the last video, we talked about the great migration across the continent of Faerun, and I have since been asked, where are the half-dwarf, half-human mixed race people, considering how long the two races have been in contact with each other when the immigrants from the Deep Realm merged with the various clans scattered across the northern mountains to form the sub-race known as the Mountain or Shield Dwarves. They founded the nations of Ogharan and Garangur, as well as clans dotted around what would become the Anarok Desert of the former Netheril Empire. This is where we find the people called the Datareg, who appear to be a short race of humans, but they are actually descended from a mix of human and dwarf. Their dwarven lineage now forgotten, and their exotic blood pretty much very thin, but still, they are proof that the two races can have children together on Faerun. There's also other examples of half-dwarven people, which I'll talk about later, from the Far East. For the Shield Dwarves, the god Dumathoin saw much potential from this deep-delving folk, and from them created his chosen nation, a sub-race called the Ore Cutters, or the Urdenirin. These are shorter than shield dwarves of old Shanatar, but like gold dwarves of the Great Rift. They have stone grey skin and hair with eyes of silver. The women of this race specifically do not have any facial hair ever, and Dumathoin gifted them both of these sexes with extraordinary abilities, such as the power to walk through solid stone as if it were air, carry up to twice their body weight in material along with them. They also have the innate ability to shape stone and metal as if it were clay in their bare hands, which is an incredible thing to witness firsthand. They don't need to eat normal food. Instead, their most well-guarded sacred temples to Dumathoin have these incredible self-replenishing nodes that produce the gems that they eat, which naturally makes them the deadly enemies of Zorn, who come sniffing around for a free meal. The clans are named after minerals, so Clan Marble, Clan Ruby, Clan Silver, all are led by the Gold Lords or Allards, who are masters of shaping metal and stone, and the other dwarves have massive respect for these dwarves, so clearly blessed by their pantheon. I mean, they wear seamless garments made of metal and stone, made flexible by their innate powers, and the Allids wear suits made of solid metal. Other dwarves are in awe of this. They may very rarely encounter the Urdineren, as well as Urdineren living deep in the Underdark, of course. Makes them quite inaccessible. I also get asked about Clan Durgar, who got enslaved by Illithid sometime before the founding of Deep Shannata. They also have grey skin and are far less hairy than other dwarven subraces. It was a long time before they managed to escape their captivity, and there are more than a few scholars that say the mythology of the origin of the Darrow race is a recent addition to their religion, but the truth is, the Darrow were the result of Illithid's crossbreeding captive Durgar with human slaves. This has never been proven, but I have to mention it as a distinct possibility and warn you that this is not a branch of study that the dwarves welcome in any way. They despise the Darrow. Other far-flung clans, such as the Desert Dwarves of Mazdaka, the Arctic Dwarves of the Great Glacier, the Albino Dwarves of Chult, and the more ancient line of dark-skinned Wild Dwarves of Chult, are all just varieties of shield dwarves who have explored the known world for thousands of years. One thing you won't find, though, are aquatic dwarves. Though they're no strangers to submersible craft and underwater mining operations, they just never took that step to living in the water so much that they fully adapted to it. Okay, let us start with the primary god of the dwarves, who is a true multiversal deity, worshipped in many realms on many worlds by a great number of beings, not just the dwarves. Moradin, the Soul Forger, the All-Father, Creator, Dwarf Father, a greater god native to Solania. Moradin resides a lot of the time in the vast dwarven mansion called Erakinor, located on the slopes of Solania. This is where the giant soul forges are located, where Moradin tempers the spirits of his people. Solania, the fourth layer of Celestia, is called the Crystal Heaven for a very good reason. While with plunging valleys covered with luminescent fogs and strange scents, and soaring peaks that are homes to countless shrines, holy shrines, including monasteries and magnificent cathedrals dedicated to devout dwarven souls who hone their spiritual and martial power under the direct supervision of their gods. Millions of mines riddle the slopes of these peaks, churning out thousands of tons of precious ores and minerals every hour of every day, mined by populations of dwarves that sing as they work, their voices thronging in the hundreds of thousands. Everywhere you go on Solania, the very rock beneath your feet thrums with the deep voices of Moradin's happy children. You want to know the power of Celestia? Well, try to imagine an army of dwarves clad in the most powerful artifacts produced in the divine smithies over thousands and thousands of years, numbering in the millions, all gleefully charging into frenzied fanatical battle, with the greatest heroes of their races ever produced forming the vanguard, unleashing supernal words of power capable of sundering and remaking reality itself, because they are directly backed up by the physical and spiritual presence of their gods. And that is just one population on one of the 7 layers of Celestia, who are not even the most powerful. Moradin presides over many cosmic portfolios. He is, of course, the primary god of the dwarves, their survival, renewal, and advancement, as well as a greater god of creation, smithing of all kinds, craftsmanship, war, protection, metalcraft, stonework, masonry, mining, engineering, and construction. Even if a character is praying to Gond over a complicated clockwork project, a part of the divine power will be finding its way directly back to Moradin. As Gond is beneath his level of power, that also means even the creation of fiendish war machines on the plains of Avernus is feeding a trickle of divine power back to Moradin, and through him, his divine agents across the multiverse, because it's an act of creation, it's an act of smithing. Therefore, it's his portfolio. As a greater power, Moradin can sense events going on across the multiverse whenever any aspect of his portfolios is involved. When he is mentioned by name, is near a holy symbol or a shrine of his, he can block the senses of lesser divine powers, manipulate gravity and time, manifest avatars, grant spells, positive energy to enormous extents. He can spontaneously manifest anything up to an artifact level item. Basically, he is an excellent example of a greater deity, and is the very embodiment of the lawful good alignment. All dwarves appease Moradin, even if they're not really devout. The faith is so deeply ingrained into their racial and cultural identity, some veneration is basically unavoidable. I mean, his holy symbol is the hammer and anvil. Every dwarf who looks at them can't help but have Moradin in their mind, as they were raised from birth on stories of legends, mythology, and prayers to their greater god, their creator. And hammers are personal decorative items and objects of such absolute utility that they're just everywhere in dwarven daily life. Even without any physical object to represent it, a dwarf can simply ball their hands into fists and strike one against the other in a hammer and anvil fashion as a quick form of devotion to their god, also as kind of a ward against evil, like we would hold up fingers to ward off the evil eye. Moradin is a stern god, softened by his love for Berena. He is the father of not just the dwarven race, but also their gods, and so the All-Father. Unlike many other pantheons, Moradin is absolutely faithful to Berena, and this reflects in a couple of very important aspects of dwarven psychology. Despite a lot of players wanting to play half-dwarves or have characters who have relationships with other races, dwarves typically do not do that, and once they are married, they don't stray from their partner, to the point that I would confidently say that those who do would be considered mentally ill by other dwarves. Adultery is a huge deal in their culture, as is the pressure to marry among their own kind, and they need to be part of family, of clan, and an unbroken legacy of their race. It's deeply ingrained in them. Does this result in bigotry, sexism, and racism? Yes, it absolutely does. It would be dishonest to say otherwise. It's a fact that dwarves do not like mixed-race relationships, and this is directly tied into the will of Moradin, which is massively ingrained into them. Humans just don't typically get what a huge cultural and racial barrier dwarven individuals face when the prospect of love outside of their own people is on the cards. They are not like humans. They know that the dwarven soul is the same primal fire in the soul forges of Moradin. It's the same fire that is the spirit of Moradin. The spark of creation from their god flows from the forge to the hammer to creation. From passion to act to pregnancy, it's the same thing. To them, making babies is not recreational, like it seems to be for a lot of humans. They accept this about the humans, more or less, but it is important not to associate every human quality with dwarves. In some very fundamental ways, they are quite different. Where the influence of Moradin is strong, the incidence of half-dwarven people are vanishingly low. Their culture works against it, as does the will of their gods. On the world of Athos, for the Dark Sun campaign setting, the gods are notably absent, and thus we have the Mull, half-dwarves, but even there they are born unable to have children of their own. This sterility is not a universal trait of half-dwarves, but it's safe to say the dwarven soul is a gift from Moradin. Where Moradin or the Mordinsaman are not present, they cannot pass it on, therefore they cannot have children. This is the subject of heated debate, of course. I can only speculate on what I've seen in the lore, but it's there, and case in point, the time known as the Thunder Blessing. The Thunder Blessing, also known as the Thundering, occurred in the year of Thunder, 1306 DR, and was the gift, the dwarven god Moradin's gift to his people, which dramatically increased the reproductive rate of dwarves. Moradin called a council of the dwarven pantheon to find a way to increase the number of dwarves. The council decided to split each existing soul into two when they were reincarnated. After the Thunder Blessing, 1 in 5 dwarven births resulted in twins, either identical or fraternal. Also, something about the nature of these twins was a bit more adventurous, a bit more radical, willing to embrace non-traditional solutions and such, which served to really revitalise dwarven culture over this generation. As the Thunder Blessing's effect was only temporary, still, in 1320 DR, the rising dwarven population among the Gold Dwarves forced them to seek out new caverns to claim and settle across the south, which in turn served to further upset the old status quo in the Underdark. In every way, this was a time of great change in relatively recent dwarven history. This was less than 200 years ago, and dwarves live on average 3 centuries or more. Also, it seems like the reproductive rates of the dwarven people has generally improved, along with the effect of these twins being born. Moradin has a lot of alliances and enemies amongst the god. He is a tough god to be friends with, though, and he is the very personification of the gruff and uncompromising dwarven personality. But he has friends. Kyrolali, Gal Glittergold, Flandel Skeelskin, Gond, Helm, Kossuth, Tyr and Torm all appreciate his personification of law and goodness. Even if he can be harsh, he is always fair. He deals with other deities who are essentially good when he needs to. In the past, he's allied with Yondala and Corellin Larathian, even though he has little interest in elven powers. When it comes down to it, they share a mutual loathing of Grumsh and Maglubayet, and all the Orcish and Goblinoid races, plus a mighty dislike of Kurtlemak and the Kobolds, as well as all the evil giants and their gods. Moradin judges his children and his followers among other races, not just on the goodness in their heart, but on the quality of their deeds and their achievements. To this end, it's not sufficient to be good but do nothing, or to be active but achieve nothing. Dwarves constantly work to better themselves. They continually challenge themselves to do better, make improvements, be better people. Moradin helps those who help others. If those others happen to be dwarves, all the better. He has given dwarves a model of achievement in himself. He is the best example of what dwarves consider to be the best a dwarf can be. Their god very seldom directly appears as an avatar on the mortal worlds. He prefers to manifest in a variety of ways to inspire or give correct direction to dwarves who seek his guidance, as they do their best to act in the best interest of their people, particularly in times of crisis. I'll talk more about that later. Any dwarf can seek guidance from Moradin. He may answer any of them in times of greatest need, such as signs appearing in the fire of a forge, runes appearing in scattered iron dust, and so on. When he does appear in avatar form, like all of the Mordinsaman, his avatar is huge, standing 20 feet tall. This is a particular trait of the Dwarven pantheon. A stern-faced male dwarf with powerful musculature, particularly in the chest, back, and arms. He has unbraided hair of pure white or jet black that flows down to his knees, with plain attire of a leather smith's apron and furs with leather leggings. He wears braces of pure gold on his forearms and has a massive, potent aura of power that is clearly visible as a white radiance that makes him look like he's almost superimposed on reality. It's hard to describe, but he appears more real, like he's in 4K HD resolution and everything else is in 240p. Though he can rein this in and mask it at will as assume any shape or form that he wants to at will for as long as he wants. If he enters combat, he instantly transforms. His body is suddenly clad in perfect +5 Dwarven plate armor and a large +5 metal shield, and his signature weapon, the Soul Hammer, a huge glowing warhammer +5. His gold braziers parry attacks and release energy back at his attackers. The warhammer, armor, and shield cannot be parted from him because they are manifestations of Moradin himself. These are not artifacts, they are his divine form. Any weapon that has been forged in any way is completely ineffective against him. He can merely reach out and touch an opponent once per day and imprison them, such as per the spell. He can banish any being 3 times a day. He can plane shift or teleport and create a firestorm where he just departed. He can also create a storm of stone, same damage but totally freaky. He is immune to any attack or effect that would alter his form. He is immune to all elemental energy, cannot be incapacitated, and has the senses of a greater god, so illusions and such are completely useless against him. He also moves through metal and stone as if it was air, and nothing short of a +3 weapon can even strike him. Most weapons will simply blow apart explosively if raised against him. Even if his avatar's physical form is slain, he can stay on that plane operating in ghost form, still with full use of his magical power, which is, you guessed it, every arcane and divine spell in existence and quite a few long forgotten. I do not advise you to attempt fisticuffs with the avatar of a greater god. It will not end well for the character, generally speaking. Moradin usually manifests as a white radiance which shines out of a being or object that he has chosen to project into. The being is most always a dwarf, and during this event, they are invested with his avatar powers. One example was, at one time, Moradin manifested into a warhammer that was then used as a battering ram to disintegrate fortifications of a prison holding a lot of dwarven people. He may also send an army of his massive retinue of Azamon, Archons, Orimvore, Aesir, Baku, Enhairar, fire beetles, Galeb-Dur, gold dragons, guardian naga, hammer golems, holophants, incarnates of the faith, living steel, maruts, nocturals, pear, sapphire dragons, shedu, elementals, silver dragons, Urdenirin, and Xaviers, many of which I realise are races that none of you have heard of yet, but yep, celestial races and the forces of good and law are pretty numerous and not covered enough in D&D lore YouTube channels. It's my bad. Moradin also gifts his favoured faithful with revelations of the directions to rare minerals, but by the appearance of a hammer and anvil symbol after a hammer blow, or an object when it's taken from a forge, or by appearing in a fire, as previously mentioned. If an item is forged that is truly exceptional, he will show his favour and may actually boost its enchantment substantially. His displeasure is shown in items breaking while they're being made, shattering anvils and extinguishing fires in forges. His church consists of clerics, crusaders and priests. They all learn how to read and write the Dethic runes of the Dwarven language. They all have enormous respect offered to them in Dwarven society. They also have a very high expectation placed on their conduct. The community has monthly offerings to Moradin in ceremonies held at the Temple Forge, usually at the time of the full moon. You can say that the heart of the religion on Toril is located in the holy temple city of Thulan. Thulan is the foundry of Stout Souls, a fortified monastic enclave located in the heart of the Deep Realms east of the Great Rift, with over 5,600 residents. The place is carved from solid rock and continually works from huge forges. It's quite a spectacular place, more of a super dungeon complex than a city. Clerics of the Orders of Moradin serve in underground temples only carved from solid rock, never in unworked caverns. They resemble smithies, dominated by one or more grand halls where the dwarves work 24/7, so there's no such thing as a quiet temple to Moradin. They are always a hive of activity. His clergy is made up primarily of males. The ratio is about 94% male according to the literature. It is very traditionally religious order, the dwarviest of dwarves. Everything they do is traditional, rote, well practiced. They offer comfort in their routine to the Dwarven people. You can always rely on the clergy of Moradin. At the heart of the temple, in every an ever-burning forge of the finest quality, fully equipped, the fires of this forge must never be put out, and the clergy will fight to the death to ensure it never does. But if it happens, the entire temple is dismantled, tore down to the stone tiles on the floor, or just dismantled and or abandoned and a new one built elsewhere. Novels of the temples are called the Unworked, and the trained priests are called forgesmiths. There's also they also called the Tempered, and then they progress in rank from adept of the anvil of the hammer, then artisan of the forge, then craftsman of runes, artificer of discoveries, and smith of souls, to the final rank of the High Old Ones, which each of them has a specific title, but they're referred to generally as the High Forgesmiths. Specialty priests are known as Sonlinar, which is a Dwarven term meaning those who work stone. You can spot the priests as they wear flowing vestment robes of shining material with precious wire of electrum woven into them that shines like crazy. They apply the special stuff called blue shine. They wear shining silver great helms and silver-plated warhammers, and they wear brown leather boots. They also wear at least a holy symbol, a miniature electrum warhammer that shines with a minor enchantment. Part of their training always involves martial training with the shield and warhammer, but like most dwarves, they get training in a variety of weapons and armour, pretty much from birth. If you want to go visit an amazing monument, in the Desserin Valley, there is this massive edifice called the Stone Bridge, a relic of the ancient dwarven realm of Belsamere. This great arc spans right across the widest part of the Desserin River. It spans 2 miles, 400 feet above the river, and has no supporting pillars at all, just solid weathered granite. 6 paces wide and put together so well you can barely see the individual blocks, even now. It is a pilgrimage site for the Dwarven faithful, as it is not only said to be a temple to Moradin, it's also said to be one of Moradin's favourite spots in the entire world of Toril, with Moradin's avatar appearing at least once. When the Ironstar clan was being chased by a horde of orcs, the avatar appeared and laid waste to them as the dwarves escaped across the bridge and down into the river valley. More videos on the dwarves to come, a whole lot of material to cover and questions to answer. Thanks everyone for your excellent feedback and support. All of those 74 different comments gave me a lot of direction to follow. In the next video, more gods and more on the secrets of Dwarven magic and language. Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Patreon for exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos, buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.